Good morning. Clark County Council is convened for work session this morning, July 16th, 2025. We have one work session on self-evaluation report for ADA transition plan updates. So Michael and Jose are here to present.
Good morning, Council. Jose Alvarez with Community Planning, filling in for Oliver, who's on vacation. This ADA transition plan is part of the comprehensive plan update, a new requirement in the HB 1181 legislation. And I'll just turn it over to Michael to go through that with you.
Good morning, councilors. Good morning. I'm Mike Salas, and I work on the third floor with Jose and Oliver. And I also work in public works with Jeremy and Ken. And so this is actually a public works project, but it also affects what we do for the comp plan update. Next slide. So before we get started, I just wanted to let you guys know so that I'm clear. We were not going to do the ADA transition plan at this time, just so because of the comp plan update, but because of House Bill 1181, it was requiring us to bring it back and have it updated as part of the climate change initiative and the comp plan update itself.
When was 1181 passed? Was very recently?
I think it was 2023.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So in this, what we're going to do is we're going to cover what is ADA, House Bill 1181, and then what we are evaluating under the ADA, and then outstanding issues for the self-evaluation report, because mostly this is about the self-evaluation report before we get into the ADA transition plan. Once we get to that point, I will also probably be back here talking about the ADA transition plan and what things that we'll have to do to make it current. Next slide. So first, we want to talk about the ADA itself, and it's the American with Disabilities Act. This is a federal law that was enacted in 1990. It's a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against people who have disabilities. Title II of ADA requires public service and public transportation accessible to those with disabilities. As part of the update, like I mentioned before, the ADA transition plan is, before it's completed, the self-evaluation report or study is conducted to inventory and map out the county's transportation facilities for deficiencies. Next slide. So, but first, let's talk a little bit about why it's required. So House Bill 1181 for ADA is part of the county was required to develop and implement an ADA transition plan as part of the climate change initiative and the comp plan update. The ADA transition plan and self-evaluation report are intended to achieve the following: identify physical obstacles that limit the ability of facilities to individuals with disabilities, describe the methods to be used to make the facilities accessible, provide a schedule for making the access modifications, and identify public officials, the public official responsible for implementation of the transition plan itself. The self-evaluation report will include the county. This is what it will include: is the county is required to perform a self-evaluation of its facilities, its current facilities, relative to accessibility requirements of the current ADA accessibility standards. The transportation facilities in the report are those that make up the pedestrian access route and pedestrian circulation path in the public right-of-way as defined in Clark County Code 4350. The type of facilities that we're evaluating will include curb ramps, sidewalks, and traffic control signals. The report will identify barriers to the accessibility of these facilities as defined in ADA. Next slide. So recently, but not recently enough, these are the areas of curb ramps where we've identified deficiencies back in 2020. We're in the process of updating these to identify any additional deficiencies throughout the county. And this is particularly in the unincorporated part of the county within our urban growth area. Next slide. This just gives you just a picture view of the standards for a curb ramp and what our engineers use to identify and make those changes within either those that are existing to bring them up to current standards or for new ramps as well. Next slide. These are sidewalks that are defective back in 2020 that we're also updating to make sure that we're concurrent and consistent with what's going on now and be able to identify what those deficiencies look like. And they're kind of a little bit all over the board. So I put in a few examples in here just to kind of show you what we're talking about. Next slide. This is obvious. It's a vertical sidewalk displacement, and this is all the pictures that I'm showing you are ones that are within the county itself. Next slide. This is a gap in the sidewalk. As you can, it's pretty, obvious. But the other part is that if you hadn't noticed, there's also no ramp, curb ramp in this one in particular. Next slide. This here, and actually this happened in my neighborhood where we actually have a mailbox that was put in place as part of the development, and it's taken away the accessibility for wheelchairs to get through this area when the standards is supposed to be at 5 feet. This is made at 4 feet, and it makes it difficult for folks in the wheelchairs to get through. Next slide. This one here is it's the accessibility or accessible push button standards. And what I'm identifying on this in here is all these items are included as part of our APS system in the county. And so this is one that would be used properly and is up to current standards. The next slide. Unfortunately, in some of those areas, we have a curb in front of the accessible pedestrian system where it makes it difficult for someone in a wheelchair to reach. So it's making those type of corrections here as part of the ADA process. Next slide. So for outstanding issues right now, what we're doing currently is looking at the facilities inventory and mapping. We're also using GIS to do an analysis and prioritize the mapping. We are using, so in the previous slides, it shows that it's 2020, but the information that we got to make it 2020 came from 2019 data that the county had already inventoried. But what we're doing now in 2025 is making sure that it's up to date. And then we'll have public outreach. Part of the public outreach is I'm working with Jordan Borghe's group, the Accessible Committee, to provide feedback and be able to make sure that we have the best document for Clark County. The other part of that is providing a survey to the public that will help us have a really good, solid document. The other part of that, once that is complete, is then the ADA transition plan, which will describe the methods to be used to make the facility accessible and provide a schedule to make the access modifications. Next slide. So this is just the draft schedule at the moment. This is, we've kind of started the self-evaluation report back in May, and we're a little bit more than, we're about 75% complete with that. We're hoping to have it a draft by the end of July. Excuse me. And at the same time, we're also making updates to the ADA transition plan itself. That's why you see such a tight timeline between July and September. The other thing is we'll continue to work with the advisory group and BPAC and others that are interested to be part of the public outreach, which basically it's ongoing until we, finish the document. As part of this work session, which identifies in July, we'll probably have another one for the ADA transition plan before we get to the point where at the end, which we haven't scheduled yet, are the hearings for the Planning Commission and the council. And next slide. And that's what I have for today.
Chair?
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Counselor.
Yeah, thank you for this. So those maps are pretty disturbing about how many deficiencies there are. And I just wanted to clarify, does this analysis include where sidewalks aren't right now and should be? And then overall, do we have the funding to address this? And have we started working on it, or are we waiting for this whole deal to get approved before we even get started? A lot of questions. Sorry.
So yes, glad that you noticed there wasn't any funding component or cost associated with this. When we Public Works had a work session with council in 2020, I don't think any of you were on that council, but there's a significant price tag and cost to the deficiencies, and that'll be part of how we determine the time frame for fixing some of these things. Some of the improvements are built into when we do pavement to do some of these curb fixes. So there's an ongoing sort of update of the deficiencies. So trying to get a handle of where exactly we are is part of this process. There's, in terms of sidewalks, as we do construction and roads, primarily on the larger roads is where we would, do the sidewalk improvements. A lot of, I think, the deficiencies in the sidewalks are sort of existing neighborhoods where, back in the 50s and 60s, developments occurred with no sidewalks. We may or may not have the right of way. So when we get to that point and filtering through what the deficiencies are with sidewalks, I think that's one of the components that we're going to need to identify or call out that's maybe different than, we're just missing this gap in the sidewalk it was shown. And then some of those are sort of anticipated to be done by development as development occurs. So, the prioritization of the deficiencies is going to be another thing that's part of the plan. So that's all to come.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Counselor Young.
Sure, a couple of questions. The first one, so 1181, does it only require that we do a self-evaluation, or does it have us have a requirement for getting things up to ADA standards? And what is that?
It's to have it that we need to include in our transportation element, the ADA transition plan. The self-evaluation is sort of the initial component of that, but the entirety of the plan needs to be in our transportation element in our comprehensive plan. We have a transition plan, but it doesn't really identify any of any projects, any kind of real deficiencies, and that goes back to maybe 2012, I think. So that that's where we are.
Okay, and then my next question would be, In terms of funding, I 100% appreciate the method of whenever we touch a street, that's when we update that. But do we currently, or are we anticipating having any funding earmarked specifically for projects that are separate from construction projects?
Well, that's one of the reasons why we're doing the inventory and the mapping. It allows us to prioritize what those projects will look like. And there are state funds that we weren't able to go after because our transition plan wasn't current. But now when it is, oh, okay. Now when it is current, then we can, go after those funds from the state.
Okay, thank you.
And I think in our 6-year plan, we call out under the ongoing projects, sidewalk and some of those, but I don't know if that's going to be sufficient enough for the scope of work that we need to do.
Okay, and then just my last comment would be, and I know we've seen you there before at the Accessible Community Advisory Committee, but I would, I think that the correct focus is to always work where we're working. For sure, that's the most efficient use of funds. But as we start developing and figuring out, we're going to spend on projects that may be apart or separate from construction projects, that we really work with the advisory committee to get good information for what really counts, what really makes the biggest difference for those people.
Yeah. And I think there was this morning in the Columbia, there was an article in the paper about what the city of Vancouver is doing. And one of the things that they talked about is they're working with the School for the Deaf and School for the Blind. And so I think that's something we can incorporate and to get some feedback.
Thank you.
Councilor Belcott.
I think Michael may have answered my question. I'm not completely sure. So how long do you expect all of these projects to be identified? And are you going to be working with the advisory committee on prioritizing which ones more of a priority than the others?
Yes, I mean, so the first part is we're going to continue to work with the advisory committee throughout not only this process but beyond. This is, the project or the document itself is a tool to be used to identify those issues and how we correct those issues. That information is given to the state on a yearly basis to identify if we met our goals for the type of projects that we're saying that we're going to do. And so that especially if there's funds associated with it, that's what they're looking at to be able to say, this is how much money we can put towards these projects in the future as we kind of go along. But as far as the prioritization of what those look like, the accessibility committee will be a big part of that to identify what those are on a yearly basis.
Right. Thank you, Michael.
You bet.
Related to prioritization, I think schools and safe access to schools would be another arena to be talking to, and really good to have a plan.
Yeah.
That's a great first start. And while it does look very daunting, I have seen just driving around the county that there's a good deal of work that's occurring right now in terms of those curb cuts being installed. One thing I've also noticed, because I live on the edge of the growth boundary, that as new development is occurring, I think there's more deficits that are being created because of that. And again, I'll go back to 179th, my favorite street to talk about, that things will be required of the developers when there's a project underway, but there's no telling when the next segment of sidewalk might be installed. It depends on that property owner. So it just really creates a lot of disjointedness as far as transportation in the neighborhood. So I don't know how to solve that problem, but I think let's all try and make it a little bit better as new areas are coming in and being developed, because It's really a hardship for those communities.
Yeah, and I think it's a challenge, exactly as you said, new areas that are being developed and the transition from that rural to urban takes time.
It's a tough one,
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, it could take quite a while.
Yeah. And like generally, you know, new construction, we get all of the sidewalks and improvements that are required. We have a few issues with some workarounds, creative.
People who don't want to develop their property.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and when would this come back to the council, do you imagine, for our like final nod?
It's going to be wrapped in with the comp plan, so it's hard to say
Hard
at
to
this
say,
point.
hard
where-
to say.
since
Well, we
that's
have a
evolving.
few more months
Yes,
to
we
deal
do.
with that.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, just for my edification, since I'm kind of new. When in the unincorporated areas is it required to put a sidewalk in or retrofit one in that doesn't exist currently?
Typically, when there's a new development, a subdivision will require that all the standards be brought up to the current standards. So the sidewalks and all of those things, curb cuts, ramps are required. There are, you know, situations where we still maybe get a dedication of right of way, but not the improvement. Some instances where I don't know if it's that there's some of those situations that we may need to rethink that. But where although there's a lot of areas that aren't being developed, and so there wouldn't be a connection at that point. So we'll have the right of way, like 179th. We know we're going to improve that roadway. It doesn't make sense to have the a builder build that when we're going to come back with a big project to do the whole thing. So we don't want to have someone make the investment and then come back and rip it out. So there's that kind of planning and thinking ahead strategically to do that. So it may take a little longer, but we'll have the whole road section completed. So those are some of the, and that's typically when new things get built. And so there are some kind of infill where there's a neighborhood, there's a lot that hasn't developed over time, and there's sidewalks on both sides, but there's this disconnect, and typically the county or the agency wouldn't put in that sidewalk unless they're doing a project to incur that cost. It's expected that that's going to be part of that land being redeveloped. And so that's, no one knows when that would be. So that's a challenge.
So for that latter situation, is there a way for us as a county council to urge that those two areas get connected, that becomes a priority?
And I think that's something that we can think through as part of this, like trying to identify how many of those situations actually exist, and then what would it cost, and what's the best place to spend our resources? Is it connecting those? Are they likely? It's a difficult thing, but we'll try to identify those and try to get some.
Yeah, thanks. And that would be another thing to ask the committee about,
Right.
I assume. Okay, thank you.
Chair, one more quick
Yes.
question.
Please.
I've always wondered this, you know, the system, I don't think there's any perfect way of doing this for sure. But, you know, there are some areas, and I'll use an example of my own. So one of the first houses that I owned in Vancouver, I wanted to build a garage. We had enough space on our lot to build a garage. It's extremely unlikely that the house would be demolished and you know, redeveloped. But when we looked at doing that project, the city required us to put in sidewalks in front of the house, and there were big trees in the way, and it rendered the project unfeasible. So is there a way that we can look at reality in some situations where there's priority places where we really need those sidewalks to go in, but it's unlikely that development will occur and that the property owner will put them in place? How do we fill those gaps? Is there a way that we can do that without like a public gift of funds, or a way that we could do the work with some sort of an eventual lien on the property or something of that nature?
I think that's something we'll have to look into but I don't think it's an uncommon thing. And it's
Yeah.
something we should think about
Yeah.
long-term.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Thank you very much for this information. I think evaluating and having a plan are very good things, and we'll stay tuned for more information. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, that was our one and only work session, so we'll close the work session and reconvene this afternoon. Thank you.